Does anyone want to debate ethilism, philosophy, so on and so forth?
Well, what's the point, Luddite? I really, I don't see us having. Like I said, you're all over the map. You want to play the thought experiment game one way, because you don't like it when somebody forces you to explain how you can equitably get away with this, and this when it's the same exact thing. I mean, I just don't understand how you can't see how there's nothing in ethilism that's obliging anybody to die or to be killed or to suffer or to be tortured. They're merely saying you're the assholes creating the problem, so why don't you stop making the mess? Yeah, your mic's probably not there.
Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Regrettably.
Wait.
Australian guy, your mic is still... Sorry, just a minute. Australian guy, why is your mic still going up and down?
I tried to put it on 54, but it just won't.
Well, then mute yourself or something, or do something about it. Cut your audio off altogether. That was interesting. Australian guy killed Luddite. Yeah. Luddite sounds drunk, so it might be funny.
I hope he doesn't go on about this hedonism bullshit.
Well, that's a whole nother subject, this whole hedonic crap, like I somehow am obligated to pay any mind to this concept at all. Why should the word hedonic mean anything to me?
It's obviously a broken way of describing it.
Well, I'm looking at it from my perspective. I just see it as being a deliberate way of slandering risk-averse, negative utilitarians, to make them sound like all they care about is booty or something. I mean, to make it hedonic is to make us, we're somehow slaves to desire. We're not slaves to desire, we're slaves to caution. We're slaves to responsibility. And calling us hedonic is just a way of somehow making it sound like we're gluttons when we're not. We're exactly the opposite of a glutton.
Well, the disconnect is hedonic in the colloquial sense and hedonic in the philosophic sense. I mean,
I'm just saying, what's the point of having a word? What is the point? That's like saying death in the philosophical sense means life, and but in the real sense it means dying horribly of syphilis. Why have the same word mean two different things? That sounds to me like a rationalization and a pile of shit. I'm just saying I didn't bring the word up. You did. You want to use it because it does imply a gluttony that has nothing to do with my risk aversion. The fact that I'm risk averse has nothing to do with hedonic, because I don't have any interest in your desire mechanism. And hedonic, even by your philosopher definition, is not risk averse, it is desire motivated.
Well, there's words like this for everything. So consider libertarianism. Okay, there's libertarianism in the fucking retarded Ron Paul sense, and then there's libertarianism in the sense of metaphysical libertarianism, i.e. free will versus determinism. So, I mean, it's just an example of that. But welfare hedonism is the descriptive position. Normatively, you're negative utilitarian, and descriptively, welfare hedonist.
Well, I'm just saying, you can choose to use these words. I've declared them, in my opinion, slanders. I don't, in my opinion, fit those descriptions, and I just find it totally useless. But you want to sit there and slander me with your words? Well, go ahead. I can't stop you, but I'm going to resist ever accepting it as a premise. I'm not going to accept you qualifying me as this thing, stating that that's what I'm about. I'm just going to reject it whenever it's part of the premise of any conversation. So I'm just saying, to me, it's just it's a fucking non-starter. I'm not going to have a conversation where I have to accept your slander.
Well, I don't think it's fair to characterize it as slander. I just don't. It's an accurate philosophic description.
It has absolutely nothing to do. I'm sorry, it's not accurate. It's completely inaccurate, as I've pointed out. I'm a negative utilitarian. If you can't call me that, if you insist on calling me a hedonist, and keep implying that I have some mechanism of my philosophy is in some way connected to hedonism, then I'm going to just keep saying, fuck you, this is bullshit, conversation over.
Okay, he's a negative utilitarian. Fine. Negative utilitarianism, I mean, whatever. Jesus. I mean, this is the problem with ethics and philosophy and ethics in general. You act like it's science, like there's an empirical way in which to demarcate various ethical systems, when clearly there is not. Negative utilitarianism is unfalsifiable.
Well, whatever this unfalsifiable, I don't have to. The truth statement is in the qualifying statements. Okay, so it's obviously I don't need a title in any respect whatsoever. I'm just giving you one because you're insisting on there being one. I have no interest in being titled anything. I have an interest in arguing just a fundamental fact. Now you're saying that ethics is blah 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 blah, as these different strategies have to be measured in some way. No, I'm saying the premises are this, okay? There's no God. We evolved on planet Earth. There's this thing called sentience. Sentience creates a welfare state, a condition, okay, that's either favorable or unfavorable, and that's what we're measuring. Now, if you can't accept those premises as the ethical foundation, all right, I'm saying from my perspective, there's little else for discussion, okay? Because, yeah, that's all there is from my perspective. You want to suggest there's some other thing that means something, like you got a gooey feeling because you heard some Mozart and therefore it's okay to have cancer on Earth because we all got to listen to Mozart. Well, you can have that as a theory. I'm just going to say, fuck you, it's bullshit. It doesn't matter what makes you happy. It only matters that you are happy. And as much as you think it matters how you become happy, it really doesn't. Whether you stick your dick in a vacuum cleaner or you stick your dick in Madonna's pussy, it really doesn't matter if you have just as good an orgasm.
Oh, so it doesn't matter if you cheat on your wife and beat your kids, you know, like...
Beating your kids obviously would imply that you're causing a negative condition in your kids. So yeah, no, it wouldn't matter if your kid likes to get beaten, and it wouldn't matter if your wife is cheating on you.
Okay, so what you've identified is this. There is what we would call an incommensurability. In other words, if one disagrees on basic first principles, when you say there's nowhere to go from there, in a sense that's correct. But what you concede is the antithetical position is internally consistent and logical. That is, the opposite of negative utilitarianism is itself internally consistent.
I don't know why I have to argue in this convoluted manner that somehow because I say something's white, I'm accepting the existence of black. No. I'm saying there's white. All right? Now, if you can demonstrate the existence of white, fine. But I'm not giving it to you. I'm not just going to sit there and say, yes, okay, you have some sort of right to argue from some other perspective, but you don't have some internal, innate right. You have to prove it. So give me evidence, give me reason to believe something else is involved, then I'll accept that involvement. But if I have no reason to believe it, then you're done. We're done. We have reached a stumbling block that is, you can't get past the stumbling block. I'm not going to accept the existence of fairy godmothers. I don't accept the existence of gods. I don't accept the existence that Mozart compensates for cancer. I don't accept, fairy tales. And these are fairy tales as far as I'm concerned. Your Stoic crap is all fairy tales. Your gooey feelings about the magnificent struggle of the Sisyphus pushing his fucking boulder is a fucking fairy tale, okay? It doesn't compensate for a stubbed toe, in my opinion.
No, the problem in all this is you assert negative utilitarianism. You haven't proved shit.
I don't have to prove it. I'm proving it I've made it as simple as possible. I'm saying the generic value, the kernel of value, is in the sentient organism. And I'm saying the rest now is just mathematics. Okay? Mathematics that we can't do with 100% certainty because we don't know final outcomes. So we have to go based on probability. So whether invading Syria is the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, what I'm saying is that my value system isn't going to necessarily answer that question because we don't have enough information to answer that question. But the question it will answer is whether I should have a baby or not. Yes, it does answer that question. Because you're only opening the door to negative potential, and the baby will do nothing to ever compensate for that negative potential.
Well, yes, obviously, if you're a negative utilitarian, having children is precluded. But you haven't established that one ought to be a negative utilitarian in the first place.
Whether you ought to be or not is, again, I can't go any simpler than the premises. Either you accept evolution and the existence of sentient organisms and the fact that a rat feeling good is just as meaningful as a human feeling good, at least a 2-year-old human, let's say. Whether a 2-year-old human is comfortable or a 10-year-old, 3-year-old rat is comfortable, in my book would be equal signs, right? So, yeah, that's the premise. If we don't agree on the premise, our conversation is kind of degraded. What I'm saying is that the idea that sentience is the kernel of value, I don't know how I prove that to you beyond saying it just seems infinitely logical to me. I can't escape it rationally. It seems like the only rational conclusion is to conclude that feeling good feels good and feeling bad feels bad. I don't know how to conclude anything else. Okay? It sucks. Suffering sucks. It seems like that's an impossible thing to defeat. It seems like there's no way you could logically argue that suffering doesn't suck.
Yes, well, you describe this. Look at long cat is long. Jesus. You look like a fucking retard. Anyway,
very helpful.
Suffering sucks. So you describe this descriptively as suffering matters, right? So if one were an axiological nihilist, then they would say, no, suffering doesn't matter. This is an abstract, purported abstract truth. It's unfalsifiable. And if I were to state, no, suffering doesn't matter, how could you possibly prove contrapose to suffering?
I told you I can't. Okay, so what I'm saying is it's from my own personal experience, I have conclusive proof. I witnessed the rape. You can't tell me the rape didn't happen because I fucking witnessed it. Alright, so the game is over. I personally have a consciousness. My consciousness informs me that suffering sucks. I think there's no more conversation. You can't tell me suffering doesn't suck because my own consciousness has already validated the proof. Now, if you don't have a consciousness and you don't know that suffering sucks, then okay, you're a computer or something, or you're some other kind of thing, and you don't get what I'm saying, fine. But I think you are conscious, and I think you know that suffering sucks, and I think you're just contriving an excuse not to accept that truth.
Yeah, but... Go ahead.
Well, let me just jump in really quick. Alright, why don't you go and stab yourself in the eye with a pencil and tell me that suffering objectively doesn't matter?
Oh, Jesus, that's fucking freshman bullshit. That's not gonna work here. Good Lord. They objectively matter. I mean, fuck off with that freshman shit. Objectively matter? It cannot. The nature of mattering is contingent upon subjectivity.
Well, again, you say so. Says you, though. Says you. Says you. That is just his high school or grammar school. Okay? To sit there and say that somehow you can just claim everything to be a subjective perception. Alright? It is not a subjective perception. What it is, a verified evidentiary perception. When I claim that suffering sucks and I explain the experience I have, and then Longcat says, yes, I've had exactly the same experience. And then some other consciousness says, yes, I've had exactly the same experience. And then we talk about animals and their behavior, and we say, it seems quite obvious that the great apes are having exactly that experience. They don't like to have fucking goddamn telephone poles shoved up their ass because it creates a negative sensation. Yeah, we have validated it. There's probably human beings that have validated this stuff by actually abusing animals in a horrific manner. But the point is the fact that negative sensation is innately repulsive, that we all have common experiences of these negative sensations, is not, in my opinion, rationally contested. It is an absolute, uncontestable, unrefutable, anything fact. It is as factually factual as facts goddamn get.
Okay, that doesn't get us anywhere. I mean, it really doesn't. Okay, so suffering sucks. So in most people's evaluation of their own suffering, suffering does not suck so much that they are willing to forego the benefits in life as against the
exactly. So let's agree that the disagreement is about the value of the positive experiences, not the value of the negative experiences. So let's agree that where the disagreement exists is how you are weighting positive experiences, not how we're weighting negative experiences. That would be helpful. So if we could agree that the negative is negative, that it's an absolute fact that it is a red motherfucking number and that it has to be compensated by an actual black number, actual green number, an actual positive has to compensate for the negative. But you won't concede the actual negative value because you know that'll get you in Benatarian doom. Okay, because Benatar is basically just going to bury you. As soon as you accept the negative reality, Benatar buries you.
No, Benatar doesn't. Benatar couldn't bury an ostrich's head in the sand. I mean, Jesus.
Just shut the fuck up with all that bullshit and just get to the goddamn point.
Well, look, don't add to the snarkiness, Longcat. Okay, we already know he's a little bit loaded, and there's no point in adding to the snarkiness. Okay, so just don't feed him. Don't feed the trolls, as they say. All right, let's try to see if we can get something useful out of him. All right, do you understand the problem here? Okay, is that we have these two elements. We have the plus element, the negative element. All right, you're denying the existence of the negative when it's to your advantage, in my opinion. Okay, and you're way inflating the value of the positive. Okay, but like again, I'll argue that Benatar is relevant as soon as you accept the negative value. Because as soon as you accept the negative value, you have to accept the obvious truth that the Martians don't exist and the universe isn't deprecated for their absence. The Venetians don't exist, the universe is not deprecated because of their absence. So the truth would be the same is true for Earthlings. Alright, and the only thing that really has weight is the negative. The positive can be disposed of without there being any negative consequence.
Yeah, Benatar, I've been over the asymmetry. Even if we grant the premises, the conclusion doesn't follow. All the premises established, at best, is that failing to come into existence is an impersonal good. This is at best, but it does not establish that coming into existence cannot be better than the impersonal good of not coming.
It cannot be. Is that again? But that requires you to propose a value. So explain to me what value the Martians have. Okay, that their absence reveals. Show me the value not realized by the non-existent Martians.
No, it doesn't matter if, like, the non-existent Martians okay, not existing may be less good than had they come into existence, but it doesn't follow that they're harmed.
No. What is revealed is that the only way the Martians, what is revealed is the only way the Martians could possibly create a necessity for their existence is for them to exist first. They have to need themselves to exist. Nothing else could possibly need them to exist or want them to exist or find usefulness in their existence. Only a Martian could love a Martian. Only a human could love a human. That's the simple truth here. And you have no real value that the human race produces or the human organism produces to compensate for a real negative value. There is no real positive. There's just a delusion in your head that says it's really cool to be human.
No, I don't even know how you begin to establish such. Like, what's the methodology? What's the epistemology here? I mean, this is where you begin to just start to make shit up.
Well, show me again. Give me one illustration of the value denied the universe by the absent Uranians.
No, but I've already argued not coming into existence is never a harm. Not coming into being is never a harm.
I'm not saying a harm. I'm not even asking you. I'm not asking you. I'm not asking you to show me a harm produced by their non-existence. I'm asking you to give me an illustration of a potential good.
No, there is no harm in not coming into existence. There's no harm in not coming into existence.
You're still not answering the question. You're still not answering the question. What good could they possibly give the universe? How could they possibly benefit the universe?
I don't know what benefit the universe means. What do you mean
I
by
mean, what positive could they produce to compensate for any potential negative they would create? How could they possibly, if there was one rabbit that was going to be squished and slowly die because the Martians were now going to exist, what will the Martians create that will be of any value to compensate for the squished rabbit?
Oh, well, what we have to do is first pull back. So you see, already you're under the assumption that we're in agreement as to the premises, right? But when we push back and question the very notion of compensation, you can't presuppose that that demanding justification is itself justified. If moral nihilism is true, then this premise is false.
If moral nihilism is true, it's a premise I don't accept. And that's why I'm saying we are stuck at this block. You will not accept the simple math that suffering does in fact suck, that feeling good feels good, but it doesn't compensate for the bad. And we're just going to keep arguing because you're going to keep saying the good is intrinsically valuable, the bad is transiently, subjectively negative, and so you'll do this convoluted math where your perception that life is good is made out of solid material, and your understanding that suffering is kind of icky. That's subjective bullshit and has nothing to do with reality all of a sudden. It's morally, nihilistically blown up and thrown out.
And one of the problems here is, if you proceed with a set of descriptions, as we know, it is logically impossible to derive a prescription from any set of descriptions, okay?
Says you! Says you! Okay, what I'm saying is a knife stuck in your heart is fatal. Okay, there's a description. Okay, and it has a prescription written into it. Okay, it is prescriptive. Is painfully fatal. Let's just say that. Knife to the nuts is painfully fatal. There's a description, and it has a prescription written right in it.
You should Hume, the fact-value dichotomy, Hume's guillotine, any set of descriptions does not lead itself to a prescription.
Well, you can keep saying it. You can keep saying this is odd bullshit, and what I'm saying is no, as soon as I say suffering sucks, okay, there's a description, All right, and it is prescriptive. It basically says, don't do suffering.
No, that's false. That's false. So, for example, take someone like Sade. So Sade would agree with the contention, suffering sucks. Now Sade, hence sadism, he derived pleasure from inflicting suffering on other individuals.
Again,
so
that's not what we're talking. So again, you've broken the suffering sucks now by calling it pleasure. So what's the fucking point? I just said suffering sucks. Now you're saying suffering derives pleasure. It can't possibly be suffering sucks if you just said it derives pleasure. So that isn't suffering anymore. That's something else. It's not suffering if it doesn't suck.
No, he derived pleasure.
It doesn't matter. Again, it doesn't matter. His deriving pleasure from it means it's intrinsically not a negative if he's deriving a positive. So his experience of it is not suffering.
Yeah, so what we see is that the normative evaluation of suffering is relative to the individual. So in other words, that there is no normativity.
Well, look, okay. Let me make this as simple. Let me make the premises this much simpler. What I'm saying is that there's a positive and a negative. You can say, okay, I don't agree with that premise, and therefore there is no evaluation. I've made this metaphor before, but to me it's as obvious as evaluating the fuel efficiency of a car. Okay, you establish what the cost is that goes into the car, which is the fuel and the maintenance. You establish what the productivity is, which is the miles you get out of it. How many miles does it travel reliably? And then you have an economy. What is its efficiency level? The argument being made is that the human organism is not sufficiently efficient, that it consumes more value in gas and maintenance expense than it produces miles to gallon.
Yeah, the problem with all this is, here, let's give a theoretical. Let's say I torture 1,000 children for a potato chip, okay? What principle of logic am I in violation of? What principle of rationality am I in violation of? Absolutely none. I'm in violation
Well, except for the fact that suffering sucks. So, except for the fact that suffering sucks, yes, you're in violation of nothing. So you've denied the existence of suffering sucking. Suffering sucking means suffering is a negative. It means it is a qualitative detriment, deficit, destruction. All the negative words you can come up with in the English language is now what that suffering is. It can't possibly be endured without having compensation adequate to its qualitative substance. And obviously a potato chip would not be compensation for the weight of the suffering.
Yes, but that's exactly what's at issue here. To the individual who tortures the children for the potato chip, it is compensation. In other words, there's no objective
I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to argue it. Of course there is objective means. There's rational means. All right? And what I'm saying is the rational means has to do with first acknowledging the existence of the negative number and then looking at the positive. And what is the nature of the positive? Is it replaceable by some other positive? Is there some other mechanism to create this thing called a satisfaction? So, quite obviously, there'd be other ways to gain your satisfaction besides torturing 100 children. Or for a potato chip, which could be, transferred to some other mechanism of gratification that wouldn't require 100 children to be tortured. So your gaining of your gratification can be understood that it is a transitory mental state, and that this other mental state is negative. Rationally, just from your own personal experience, you would understand it to be, I would not experience that. I would not buy that if it was on the shelf at Walmart, because it's not rational compensation.
Yes, see, this is where the system breaks down. In other words, you get into first principles, axiomatic principles that themselves cannot be rationally demonstrated.
No, because I can't sit there and dissect the evil psychology of Jeffrey Dahmer doesn't mean I can't put Jeffrey Dahmer's psychology in a category and say it is deluded and abnormal and irrational. That it is no longer founded in any kind of rational equation, rational understanding of value. It's broken. All right? But yeah, I can't sit there and demonstrate to you the exact nature of his perceptual perversion, beyond just saying he quite obviously doesn't understand the weight of the pain, and he doesn't understand the value of his gratification in any kind of realistic context. Somehow he thinks his gratification is this big, and he thinks that suffering is this big. And it's not rational. It's not what we could put in the category of a sensible appreciation for value. But again, I can only go by my personal experience with consciousness. That's all. So yes, my subjective consciousness informs me of value. I presume my subjective consciousness is similar to your subjective consciousness, is subject to every other great ape's consciousness. That we have similar ability to sensate, to feel. And the only thing we're doing differently is in what we're doing to the word life. Okay? You're seeing puffy clouds, butterflies, and little bees. I'm seeing the word life as replicating molecule, diluted psychology. I'm understanding that I could get gratification watching the Red Sox win the World Series, and I would know I was only doing that because I was addicted, because I was a drama whore, because I wanted to see how the soap opera turned out. Okay, that it's just a silly addiction, a delusion of my psychology, and that it doesn't matter whether the fucking Red Sox win the World Series. It means absolutely nothing. It only means something to me because I'm addicted to it. And so what I'm saying is I can understand that that gratification means nothing, and that the suffering means everything.
Okay, so you've admitted that when it comes to first principles, you have to retreat to subjective experience, and then Dahmer does